Hey, what's up YouTube? Terminally unkempt philosopher here, back with another video. Today we're going to be talking about why you can't solve your problems. This is going to be part one. This one is going to be aimed more at Western psychotherapy. The second one is going to be about methods that we can use to kind of aid this process. And then the third is going to be a more Eastern approach. So I'm going to give an example throughout this just so that we can kind of see how we navigate this specific example. Your situation might not be exactly the same, but it is still very useful to see how this framing is kind of broken up and all of the things that get taken into consideration when approaching this problem. If you have any comment that you want to leave that's about your situation and how it might vary, please do so. You can also email me. I'll leave my email in the description and you can reach out to me there and we can talk a bit more. Possibly have a session or something together. Here's my example. This is a old kind of narrative that I've since shook, but I think is a very, very good example because it's kind of all encompassing. So I went on a date and I kept thinking about what I should do. That's the situation. And it was driving me mad. The framing one of this is, I have a problem. I can't be present with girls I'm attracted to. What's my solution? I'll solve this problem by watching self-help videos. I'll go to the gym. I'll fix myself. I'll start doing healthy habits. I'll eat healthier. I'll meditate, etc., etc. Realization one, none of this works. Okay? None of it works. It might subdue the problem or lessen it a bit, but it never really solves it. It never breaks me from this cycle. Now, my answer to this is that I don't try hard enough, that I'm doing things wrong, that I'm broken, or that I just suck. And that's not very helpful because it just leads you back to the same cycle of trying to do all these things, realizing nothing ever works, doing things never works, right? Here's the first part. This is where we're going to be challenging it, okay? This is realization two in a sense. If my problem was correctly identified and no solutions have completely eliminated the problem, maybe my premises that led to the framing are incorrect, okay? Now, there is a meta problem. The meta problem has to do with our perception, all right? We have all these problems in life. We have these recurring things. I don't understand why they happen, right? They happen. I can't shake them. I don't know. So let's think about it like this. I don't have a problem. My perception is problematic. The way I view things ensures discontent, confusion, conflict, and suffering. Not understanding the way that I view things is the cause of this cycle. Now, reframing it as, my awareness observes a stress-inducing, recurring pattern of thought and behavior, and I don't understand the cause of it. All right? Now, getting a bit more into the understanding of perception. The fact that I identify and automatically enact this pattern of thoughts and emotions indicates something important regarding my subconscious lived beliefs. Understanding the way I view things and what I believe will curate more awareness, agency, and conviction to dismiss the possible narratives I might be latching onto. Now, to explain beliefs a bit, we're going to talk about cognitive dissonance really quickly. There is your lived beliefs and emotional responses. There is like what's integrated into yourself and what you enact naturally. And then there is your rational and logical beliefs, right? Now, when your lived beliefs and your logical beliefs clash, it's called cognitive dissonance. And the reason it's called cognitive dissonance is because there's a dissonance between these beliefs. There's a way that I believe that I want to be acting or should be acting or things that I believe about the world. And then there's what I actually do, right? This is what I actually do. Some of these things might be unknown to me, but it is knowing these things that helps actually reconcile the two and bring it into the integration of actually myself. There's a lot of terms. Self-actualization is one that you can use. So how do we self-actualize, right? Well, we have to understand what it is that we actually really believe. So we're going to start by doing that. Question one, explain the date from start to finish, or the day in general, and just the conception of this pattern from the end of its reign over you, so to speak. Here's what I wrote. I'm getting ready for the date. I start to feel anxiety in my chest. I'm hoping it'll go right, and I'm desperately trying to make sure that I look good and perfect because it has to go well, and that's important. It has to go well, right? In the car, I'm worrying about making it there on time and seeming cool, calm, and collected. I'm annoyed by the anxiety and want it to go away. We meet, and I'm very nervous. I want it to go right. I'm just asking a lot of questions, and I can't really be present because I'm trying to think of how I can be interesting and what I should say to not mess it up. I'm worried often that if I don't make a move, I'll blow it. I go home exhausted and disappointed, even though it went okay. Here's some observations about that. There's a feeling that it has to go well, right? There's my desperate and excessive overthinking in conflict with my desire for presence, right? So there's a conflict there. I know that I want to be present, but my overthinking clashes with that. There's an urge to force a move that I don't want to do, but I feel like I have to, and then I create this awkward sense of urgency to do something. There's a belief that I am inadequate, and I must be enhanced by analysis to make it more interesting. I'm lacking in some sense, and I need to think of things to say to make myself more interesting. And the last one is my anxiety is ignored. There's even a combativeness towards it in what it's telling me, right? So I have this anxiety, it's telling me something, but I'm like, go away, fuck off. You're making this worse, right? That's my combativeness towards it. So here's a brief consideration before we get into very intense questions, and this is really something important to consider because for some people it might be really, really, really pressing. Sometimes when answering difficult questions, especially emotional ones, the mind will step in to provide a quick thought answer. We can call this intellectualization or cleverness. These answers can often obfuscate an unknown, perhaps subconscious answer, deeper emotional answer, that may require more specialized techniques to dig deeper or simply just time and observation. It is your job to verify the truth of your answers to account for this tendency, right? So an example of this, I had a problem, recurring pattern of thought and behavior, of this desire to figure it out. And it was very black and white. It's either I had things figured out or I was clueless. And so when faced with deep emotional questions, not having an answer means being clueless. And so when I'm asked a difficult, complex emotional question, my mind will step in to save me, in some sense, to protect me from the hurt of feeling clueless by giving a quick answer that's not exactly true, right? It's just what I think about the matter. So it's your job as an individual to verify whether or not your answers to deep emotional questions are true. And it might be a difficult thing to do. And again, it might be another section of inquiry to explore why it is that you actually do this, like I have, in terms of intellectualization. Now, here we go into a little bit of a deeper question. What might happen if it doesn't go well, right? Because there's this feeling that it has to go well. What will happen if it doesn't go well, though? What might it say about me? That's really important, right? Because it says something about me as a person, about who I am, if it doesn't go well. The answer to that, I wrote, is that I'm not attractive or interesting enough, that I'm not confident or present enough, and I worry that if I'm not attentive to these things, that our interactions will be dull and it will be my own shortcomings. Something to note there, it places 100% of the blame and accountability for how the date goes on me. It doesn't take into factor anything of accountability, and it doesn't take into account the other person's responsibility to also make the date interesting, which it absolutely is. Doesn't matter who you are, what your gender is. We're both here 50-50, right? Here are the list of considerations. First, there is a desire for presence. There's an understanding that when I'm present, that I'm confident, and I'm effortlessly myself, void of worry, doubt, and lack. The reason I desire presence is because pragmatically it increases my chances. But it should be noted that this guarantees nothing, right? It doesn't guarantee anything. And the desire for presence isn't genuine, right? It's out of fear of what might happen if I'm not present, okay? Second, there is a trying urge. This arises because I believe that I'm inadequate, and I must force things to happen, such as making questions, making a move, coming off as confident or interesting. Now, this conflicts with the desire for presence, because if I'm thinking excessively that I'm not present, the moment that I'm identified with my thoughts and I'm moving through the internal monologue of what I need to do, I'm not actually there completely. Lastly, there is a worry. This worry arises from the doubt that I have towards my intuitive ability to accomplish the previous tasks. I fear that if I don't care in the way that I do, then I will remain inadequate or less than some standard or expectation that I set for myself. This pattern keeps me trapped in a cycle of trying to affect an outcome with great dissonance, while feeling that my character is personally attacked if things don't go perfectly, which they never do, which is really important too. They never go as this expectation that I have set for myself. It should also be noted that it holds me disproportionately accountable for the date's outcome. Again, we kind of talked about that, right? Realization 3. What would truly liberate me is not the outcome being achieved, because the cycle is never satiated, as evidenced by the fact that every time we tried to do a solution or do this thing, Nothing ever worked, right? But no longer feeling the need to be other than I am in that moment, because my truth self is fundamentally unlacking and the best version of myself, right? When I am present, you can think of a time in a day where you were completely present, or during an activity, that was the best version of yourself. And you probably made the best art, you probably had the best conversations, because you weren't focused so much on what was inadequate about your mind or what is lacking there. You were just flowing. You were just flowing. And the Western kind of idea of this is flow state is kind of a good way of thinking about it, although flow state kind of implies that you're doing some sort of task. It doesn't necessarily have to be like that. Presence is what you want, right? So the self that is present is fundamentally unlacking, right? That version of yourself doesn't lack anything. And we'll talk more about that in the kind of the Eastern side of things. Here's the last question, just to make this more concise. What do I gain from the feeling of inadequacy? Now that might feel funny, right? Like, it's silly. What do I gain? I don't gain anything. I hate feeling this way. But the truth of the matter is that you wouldn't believe in any of this, any belief, if you did not gain something from it. The thing that you gain might be to feel that you're worthy enough, to feel that you're not broken, to feel that you're better than others in some way. This happens with people that do things to kind of become smart, right? They want validation that they're smart, and they do things to try to get that validation out of them. And in turn, they become less present because you're in your head thinking of how you can be more smart about it, what you can prove to people. This happens when people, sometimes they overtalk or overshare. It's because they're trying to prove something to that other person, which again is the lack of presence, to be involved in this sort of mechanism. What I answered here, what I gain is the worthiness of someone's love, in the sense that I am deserving of love in general, that I'm worth enough. Now here comes integration. Over time, with more understanding, there may come a moment where it clicks. It might feel like a revelation. It probably is a revelation. This occurrence is your perception shifting and your values and desires changing. There will be no volition in any of this, just as there is no volition in whether or not you understand something, just as a sentence. Just as there is no control over how high your legs allow you to jump at any given moment. So what we want is understanding, right? We want to understand these parts of ourselves better, but we also can't force it. And what I mean by that is, if you ask yourself a question, there won't always be an answer. You know what I mean? Because whether or not an answer arises within you is not a volition, just as thoughts just kind of arise, right? We often think that we are the thinker of our thoughts, but if you sit there long enough and observe your thoughts, think about this. Think of an intrusive thought you've had. Did you want to think that intrusive thought? Was that something that you did? You know what I mean? You could maybe chalk it up to, oh, it's just, that's me, that's the inadequacy. But if you watch, there's no volition in any of that. There's no agency in whether or not that thought arises. And you probably really don't want that thought to arise. But it just happens out of nowhere. Everybody experiences intrusive thoughts. And they're very upsetting because you feel like they say something about you. And that's something we'll talk about more in the Eastern video again. But there's other questions that you can ask yourself. These are just general questions to throw out. And this is, again, kind of aimed at the specific example. But what is my anxiety saying to me? What about me is inadequate? Why is presence so important to me? What will happen if things go well? Why do I combat my anxiety? Why do I run from it when it's telling me something, right? So here we kind of have this structure, right? We've restructured the problem from a problem to just a recurring pattern thoughts of behavior, which kind of gives it a bit less power. We want to observe it because the reason it keeps recurring is we don't fundamentally understand it. We don't understand what it says about our beliefs, what we believe about ourselves, what we believe about the situation in the world, et cetera, right? So we're reframing that. We're looking at doing, right? This excessive act of doing, of trying to do things to make a certain outcome doesn't ever work. It only just lessens things temporarily. And then when that doesn't work, then you feel like you're lacking. You feel like, man, I'm a piece of shit because I can't do the things that are going to get the thing. But the truth is that what would truly liberate you is if you didn't care about getting that thing, right? So much that it's desperate, that it says something about your worth. If it was genuine, then it wouldn't feel like you're lacking when you don't hit the mark or something like that, when you don't hit your aim. And then we kind of ask these deeper questions to try to really get at what it is that our beliefs are, what they're telling us about ourselves. And then with time, just sort of naturally and intuitively, these things will produce organic change within yourself. But again, this will have to come with time and observation, and you'll actually have to want to not believe anymore after you see clearly the pros and cons of believing and not believing. But the only way you build up that pros and cons list, that data, is by understanding deeper about yourself, is by observing yourself in those moments and not trying to run or escape or do something about it, but just observing and seeing and hearing, maybe what your subconscious is saying, because sometimes it'll speak to you. And we'll get a bit more into that in the part 2. So that's the end of the video. If you guys have any input or any questions, please leave it in the comments. If there's any way that I can structure these videos better, please let me know, and I will take into consideration that input going into the next video forward. The next video, it might be a few days, it might be a week before it comes out, but that should give enough time for viewers to kind of give input and say, hey, this might work a little bit better moving forward. Lastly, just if you like this video, if it was helpful, please like and subscribe, and ring that MF and bell, all that good stuff. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.